Why do you like RPGs? A good friend of mine asked me this recently, and to be honest, it's something I'd never really given a lot of thought to before, so I decided to take a brief moment to reflect on it. And I'm sharing it with everybody else to see if anybody else out there can identify or agree or disagree, maybe has similar experiences. So to begin with this story, I will start by describing two very different games. One is generally regarded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, and the other seems very much rooted in cult classic status. That has more to do with the platform it was released on rather than the quality of the game itself, which is right up there with the genre's best. These two games are Final Fantasy VI, originally released as Final Fantasy III for the Super Nintendo in the West, and Lunar the Silver Star. By talking about these two games and what makes them so great, I'm also going to describe why I like RPGs. So the thing about Final Fantasy VI, it really is truly an epic told in video game form. It is an interactive epic that you can take control in. You know, it's right up there with Hollywood's best. It's right up there with the greatest novels. But again, it's interactive. You control it. You get to choose what characters you're going to use. You get to direct them. You help them in their development. You watch them grow. You watch their dilemmas and their dramas. You see relationships unfold. You see characters live and die and triumph and fail and retaliate and recover, and everything plays out in such a prolonged manner that when it's all said and done, you just become very closely connected to the characters and their circumstances, far more than you would with, say, a 2 or 3 hour film or a 100 to 300 odd page book. Great experiences, to be sure. They can lead to wonderful memories, great experiences, emotional, but nothing like a video game that can last 30 to 40 to 50 hours or more. And that's the major difference between RPGs and other video games. RPGs are more of a time investment. So while they do take a lot of time, there's more payoff emotionally. You become more connected with the characters, you feel more involved with the story, and the story has time to really develop legs and grow and go farther than a movie or book ever could, because they're limited by their time. You know, after 30 or 40 hours, you know so much about these people, their backstory, where they've been, where they're going. You know, it just takes things to another level that's hard to put in words. But anybody who's experienced this will understand full well what I'm saying. Final Fantasy VI is a grand epic that goes as far as to destroy the world and then put you in a situation where you and a small band of people have to set about setting things right and rebuilding it literally brick by brick in a lot of ways. So the game indirectly, and a lot of RPGs have this quality, they teach you a lot of life lessons without even trying. It's very subtle, it's very subliminal, it's very indirect, but it's very strong, it's very profound, and the implications are proof positive when you look back on the game after you've conquered the game and you've seen the ending. You think back on everything that's happened, and there's a very strong sense that you just experienced something. And that's one of the amazing things about games in general, you know, so-called virtual reality. Even though this isn't real, due to your emotions, you've created an experience internally through this interactive stimulation that very much feels real. And there's very little difference between what feels real and what is real. If it feels real, essentially it is real. At that point, it becomes real. And video games can take you further than most of the media can, and RPGs go further than most video games. You know, a good action game, a good fighting game can be a very wonderful experience too, but it's usually short-lived. Video games, you know, will literally take you to hell and back. And there's just so much that takes place along the way, it's hard not to get attached, provided that they do their job. When it comes to this, few games succeed as well as Final Fantasy VI. And Lunar the Silver Star is just one of the most charming pieces of fictional work that's ever been put together by human hands and human minds. To me, Lunar, well, I'll say it like this. Whereas Final Fantasy was the epic that missed Hollywood, Lunar is the anime that became a video game instead. You know, in a past life, Lunar was an anime. It was meant to be an anime, but instead they chose to make a video game. And again, the same advantages. Instead of an anime, that could have been a great series, but still, with a video game, there's more personal involvement in there. There's more time to flesh out each character, each backstory. You know, there's more time to really allow things to just breathe and grow and mature. You have time for a little more side humor and, you know, little little extra touches that you usually don't have the time for with a film or television show. So this is one of the main draw points of RPGs. You know, they can really suck you in like that. So as long as the gameplay holds up and also the music, video games in general have come a long way as far as their soundtracks. But role-playing games have always had fantastic arrangements. A lot of times they have orchestrated sound, live instruments. You know, it's very hypnotic. It ranges from metal to classical, jazz, all genres of music. So if you're a music lover, such as myself, there's a big reason right there to play RPGs. You'll hear some of the best music anywhere in a lot of these games. I could go on and on and on, but to summarize, that's the main reason that I drew to RPGs. I grew up with a brother who had a Super Nintendo, and it took a few years for me to get my own game console. My first one was a Sega Genesis, which I followed up with a Sega CD and Sega Saturn. And I played Final Fantasy VI and Lunar, well back then Final Fantasy III, and Lunar around the same time. My brother had Final Fantasy III, I had Lunar for the Sega CD. And both of these games, though very different experiences, both had a profound impact on me emotionally. And growing up, I've looked back and there's so much philosophical and spiritual suggestion that crops up in these games that you don't think about at a young age. But looking back, there's so much on existentialism and the dichotomy between light and dark, good and evil, you know, religion and politics, sex, love, war, all the major life-changing topics. They go through the gamut, and nothing is left untouched. Nothing is off limits. Nothing is too taboo. You know, they're not afraid to talk about the things that they're too often too scared to touch in TV and even film. So I've learned a lot about ancient history in video games. There are a lot of old words that you normally are out of circulation that you won't see outside of video games. So yeah, they actually do help your vocabulary. If you're struggling with the English language, play some RPGs. I guarantee you're going to learn a lot of new words and ancient languages, ancient customs, ancient cultures. You know, when I think back on all the great anecdotes and quotes and sayings from fictional characters, so much of that has come from video game characters. Looking back, just really great stuff. Far trumps a lot of the things I've seen on television and movies, and far more memorable in many cases. And as far as the knowledge that they impart, I mean, everything from Sephiroth, you know, which is a reference to the Kabbalah and the Torah. You know, what was the name of one of the antagonists in Final Fantasy VII? Jehovah. You know, it's pretty obvious what that's referencing. And, you know, at a young age, at least in my case, I didn't really know what that was. I didn't think about it. But as time went on, I, you know, graduated to higher levels of education, studied more diverse and more in-depth topics. I started to come across some old names and faces in scriptures and old accounts and myths and legends, and thinking, wow, I came across this in this game or that game. And it's almost as if they were educating us unintentionally. Or maybe it was all very intentional, but definitely on a sublime level. So thank you, games, for captivating my imagination, arresting my attention, keeping me from getting involved in more unproductive and dangerous hobbies and interests, and really giving me a fresh way to look at the world and reimagine the world that we live in. Video games have done the historians a favor. They've preserved a lot of world history in the form of fiction. And that could be another video in and of itself. It probably won't be, but with that being said, that's why I like RPGs. You know, they're very in-depth, they're very involving, they're fun to play, exquisite music, just wonderful stories told in a way that makes it very personal and involves you directly. Strategy RPGs, traditional Japanese RPGs, whatever form it takes, they're games that make you think and make you happy to do so. So that's my story. But what about you? For those that do, why do you like RPGs? And to my friend who asked this question originally, thank you. And why do you like the types of games you like? Something to think about. There's a reason for everything, including the things we love. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was interesting. Thanks for watching.